Welcome to Bring Out Your Badass Self, a movement to break your negative thoughts and habits and instead focus on building each other up and encouraging fearless authenticity.
Each week, we will get vulnerable and share experiences alongside our guests and audience. Come rediscover your inner badass self.
Good morning, badass.
Good morning. Did you blow up some shit yesterday?
I did not. I did watch Chuck blow up some shit yesterday, a little bit. His fireworks were very old and it had rained a lot, so it was a little wonky.
Uh-oh.
But kids had fun with sparklers. What about you?
We have a friend who is a professional fireworks guy. So we went out and watched what he does. And so it's a little bit of a hidden gem where we go. It's just we have a very nice place that we go to watch it and everything. And yesterday we did it with friends and just had a good time just talking with people prior to the fireworks and everything, and then the fireworks show was amazing and just like right there, so
yeah,
it was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Our kids actually aren't that into fireworks. Only really one of them, Brandon. So Brandon went off with friends to watch here in our city, and the rest of us just chilled. We had like a barbecue, a cookout with our friends Rachel and Chuck earlier in the day. But yeah.
Well, I'm hoping through this conversation I can tell you're a little tired and down today.
I'm tired.
So hopefully this conversation will liven things up for you. I gotta tell you, I'm in a little bit of a rare mood. I'm feeling very colorful today. And so that's also why I chose these shirts. I was like, let's wear our colorful shirts today.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm excited about today's topic. This is something I'm super passionate about. And also I have continued to learn things myself, like as I go through it and through life, I'm like I wasn't respecting someone's boundaries. I wasn't respecting someone's consent. So as I've gone through this, it's being very reflective in understanding where we might each all need to grow regarding consent.
Yeah, I know that you're passionate about this topic. I am as well. I mean, it's just a super important topic. And especially when it comes to parenting, we're going to cover a lot of that today too, just because we all have kids in our lives. And this is something that is really, really super helpful if it's reinforced, not just by the parent themselves, right? Like if the community around, any kiddo or all of us, this is a part of our whole social construct, right? So this is something that affects everyone.
Yeah, and you would think after sort of the post-Me Too era that people would be knowledgeable about this, but I continue to find that people aren't so much still knowledgeable about this topic. And so today we're really going to explore the importance of establishing consent, how to build healthy relationships, and ultimately how to foster a culture of respect. Because one of the things that I'm really passionate about is not only consent, but boundaries. And this really includes that. Boundaries are crucial. And I find that sometimes people have a hard time establishing boundaries for themselves. Sometimes they'll respect other people's boundaries and sometimes they don't. But sometimes people allow themselves to have people overstep their boundaries, which is really in connection with consent.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And some people need to learn how to set boundaries, and it's connected to like a deeper issue there, right? Like a deeper issue of self-love, right? Like if you aren't taking care of yourself, boundaries is one of the first places that you need to kind of look to, like go to that area and decide like, what can I do to make myself feel better in some sort of situation, and then practice setting a boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And today we're going to really cover how to communicate consent to our kids.
Yeah.
And I'm also sort of thinking adults might learn some things along the way. And as I said earlier on, I know I have continued to learn on this topic as well. And most importantly, we're going to discuss tips on how to ensure you receive enthusiastic consent and how to create a consent culture. So that's what's on the agenda today.
Yes.
So
I'm here for it.
yes. So real quick, let's see who we have coming in today. We have Carmen. She says, good morning, my favorite beautiful badasses. Good morning, Carmen.
Good morning.
Love it when you come. Kim, so glad you're here this morning, and hope you had a great 4th of July as well. And let us know if you blew up some shit. We have Brenda Lees that's joining us. Hello. She says, it's been a while since I passed by here. So glad you're here. We have Eric
hi, Brenda Lees.
as well. He says, good badass morning. We have J-Ro. Good morning, badass ladies. Happy Friday.
Good
And then we
morning.
also have Carrie. She says, aloha.
Aloha.
Are you in Hawaii, Carrie? I just came from there not a couple weeks ago.
I wonder what the Hawaiians, or how Hawaiians celebrate 4th of July, if it's unique in some way.
I don't know. I mean, they're a part of the US, so
Right.
so
Right. But I'm just curious because, they have like a lot of things. It's like they have their own component of their culture. So I'm just curious.
Well, I have.
If anyone knows, let us know. I can't Google right now. It's just inappropriate for me to Google that right now.
Gail says, good morning. Welcome, Gail.
Good morning,
and Carrie said, sadly, no. She's not.
But she says she's always in Hawaii in her soul.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I have a question to start the audience off. And Kate, I'm also going to pose this to you as well. Have you ever felt pressured to give or receive consent in a situation? So thumbs up, thumbs down. And if you want to tell us anything from our audience on, how did you handle it? And so, Kate, the question is also for you. Have you ever felt pressured to give or receive consent in a situation? And how did you handle it?
Yeah. So tons of times, especially earlier in my life. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of, I would say like sexual, like consent issues, I had plenty of situations that were not good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, so I could get, without getting too deep into some of those. But I will say as I got a little older, and aged, like I really struggled with some of these issues around giving consent, in my early 20s. And as I got a little older, I got a little better at it. And so what I noticed about myself was that I had because I laugh so often and I have like a nervous laugh, is that I often give off the complete wrong impression, right? Because I will just start laughing, right? So, so that's been something that I have had to be like really, really crystal clear about.
And you talked about that on the last episode. For people who weren't here, you were like, I know I'm laughing, but I'm being serious. Like this is a serious issue.
Yes. Yeah. I have to start to do that. Because like I will think like sometimes I don't know if it's like I find things inappropriately funny or if I just like am like nervous laughing, I can't really tell the difference. So, but I know there are times when I'm like, this is a serious situation and I know I'm laughing. And so I have started to say just that. So it's really funny that I did that recently because I've started to say that when I like am setting a boundary. I've recently done it when I've gone out to bars lately. I'm really tired of like over sexualization. You know, like I'm tired of when a group of adults get together and they start drinking, like it always turns to sex conversations, you know, and that's fun, you know, but like there are times when it just goes overboard, especially like lately when I've gone in bars, I'm just noticing it, right? Like where everybody starts touching each other and you know, and and maybe it's because usually I'm sober, but a lot of the times I'm like, I don't like this. So I like move out of the situation, or I, you know, do something different, or nervous laugh, or dance away. You know, like I've done like a French exit, but I'm just like dancing out of the room. But lately I've been practicing with just saying, like, so, you know, I've just said a few times, like, hey, you know, I'm not trying to be mean, but I really don't want you to be touching me right now. Like, we just met. So tell me that story without continuously touching my thigh, please. You know, like,
yeah,
that's that. And I have to say sometimes, like, I know I'm laughing, but I really don't want you touching me. You know, and then it's gone well a few times that I've done that lately.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gail says, yes, Kate, I do the same thing. I laugh first and then think second.
Yes.
So, you know, and the thing is that as we start to have this conversation, most of the time people think about consent related to sex.
Yeah.
But there's so much more to consent. You know, whenever I think back on sometimes even within a job, sometimes you felt like you couldn't say no to extra work or to staying late. Like I was working at 2:00 in the morning at one of my past companies. Like that should not be acceptable. And that was sort of expected because the person was such a procrastinator that, well, if I'm with you, they would be like, well, I'm with you. And I'm like, this isn't really acceptable to have to get a proposal done and be here at 2:00 in the morning. Like, but I didn't think about those things whenever I was young because you're just thinking you want to keep your job.
Right.
And so it's those types of things that we're going to talk about today that I want you to reflect upon, not only the sexual aspect of consent, but also consent related to the workplace. Yeah. And then more importantly, how can we instill this in our kids and model it as we're talking about this particular topic? So I want to share up this particular graphic that sort of helps illustrate what consent is that I created. It's called fries. So if you can remember fries, I love fries. Freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. And so we're going to get into each of these as to what they mean. But I want people to remember I love fries related to consent. So freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. Yeah. And so when we think about, I'm going to jump to what does consent not look like? What I want to ask the audience is, what is an example of what consent doesn't look like? So what are words or actions or things like that that people might do? You know, Kate, while they're providing us their thoughts, I'm going to go ahead and pull up some other things that were said, and then let's also talk about it ourselves. So I'm an advocate of hula hoop space even prior to COVID.
I love that, Carrie. Yeah.
I need some hula hoop space.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Jen says consent for your children can be a lot of heaviness. Schools consents, vaccines, medical. Oof. Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, Jenna could talk on the topic of consent and children for forever, because there's so much there, and it's more than just I mean, we'll get into it, but like childism is a real thing, right? Like, because we as parents have to be in charge, you know, but we also can not only just model ways, but we can ask for consent from our kids to just make sure that they're on board, right?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah.
and it would be like so many things would be is so much easier if the kid's on board, right? And so you can do it in all sorts of simple ways, but by giving choices too, not just like, not everything is a yes or no. But the biggest, for me, the biggest thing, besides the obvious no, right?
Right.
The obvious is, what does consent not look like? A no is like when somebody says, well, I didn't want you to feel bad. Right? That's a huge one. Like, that's a huge one that, like, you did it for someone else. I didn't want them to feel bad, so I did it. Like, that's not really you doing it. That's not consent.
Yeah. And there's a lot of them that give you indications that it's not a yes. And so we're going to go through some of those examples. I was curious if people had some, but ultimately, if you go back to the fries, it's freely given.
Right.
So it's not forced upon someone, meaning there's no anger or things like that are requiring them to where you feel obligated to do things. Right. It's also reversible, meaning that I can say yes and mean it, and then I can come back and say, I've changed my mind, or I'm feeling uncomfortable. And so informed is making sure that we're on the same page. Like, what you're saying is it the same as my definition of it? Enthusiastic, that to me is one of the biggest ways that we can tell whether someone actually is giving consent or not. Are they enthusiastically saying yes, like, yes, I'm into this, I want to do this. So when we start to think about the words that are the opposite of that, it's like, I don't know. Even just, I don't know.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Right.
Wait.
I did it for them, or I did it, those are like examples of, you're not very enthusiastic. You're not really into this.
Exactly. Yeah. And, it's things like, can we take a break? Like, time out. Or maybe later. Oh my gosh. I don't know how many times my husband has learned, in my enthusiastic yes, like we have had this conversation, and he knows that I'm going to give him a yes if we're going to have sex. And so my husband and I have sort of this agreement, but sometimes it doesn't always happen that way. And so for me, I know my husband is an extremely sexual person, and he loves sex. And so for me, I have put it in my mind that for me, I also enjoy sex. I'm not the one that's typically going to initiate. And that was something that rubbed us early on in our marriage, that we had to work through. Like, he felt that if I wasn't initiating, I wasn't interested. I'm like, no, that's not the case. It's just my body isn't necessarily enthusiastic about it, just because it's like, I would rather sleep, or I'd rather do like other things sometimes. But I also understand that it's important to him. So for me, I'm enthusiastic about it when we do things that help me to sort of get there. And so we have agreed that we do it pretty much every other day. And because my husband could do it 3 times a day. And I'm just like, yeah, I can't do that. But I know how important it is to him. And so him and I have figured out like what works for us. But for me, I am enthusiastic as we are as he is getting me mentally there, because I'm a very, like, if I have a lot of shit on my mind, I'm not going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And so it's having that informed discussion. And I also had to, get him to understand that I'm not sure, or maybe later, or I'm not really feeling it, or things like that is a no. Like, don't continue to come at me. I'm going to tell you yes, or I'm going to, or it's basically a no. And so
Right. Right.
having that mutual respect with each other, that whenever I'm saying, like, you're feeling a little guilty for saying no, it still means no.
Right. Yeah. No
Yeah.
matter what feelings you may have around it. And I do know that a lot of times, people have a hard time, especially when it comes to sex with someone they love, they have a hard time saying no, because they don't want that person to feel bad, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
oh, I don't want you to think I don't want to have sex with you. I do, but
exactly.
I also just like took a big poop and I just don't feel sexy.
Exactly.
Right.
I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
So Carrie says a mundane okay isn't consent. I like that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, I want to get into, as adults, I talked about this, what are ways that we can help kids learn to trust their body? Because I think that that's actually the most enlightening aspect, when we're able to help teach kids to learn consent and respect their bodies. Us as adults go, oh shit, am I doing this?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And there's a huge balance there, right? Because we want, just like with all things with parenting, we want our kiddos to like learn to be individuals. But we also want them to make the right choices and to be safe. Right. So
Exactly.
like sometimes that penetrates our thinking into areas that maybe we don't have to be as directive about, and so like food is one of those things, right?
Hmm.
And so Jenna and I learned fairly fast with our kiddos that were, had issues or mental health issues. And then also like our kiddos from the foster care system, as we were fostering, food is a comfort, and it's also, a trigger for a lot of people who've been through different types of traumas,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So even though we all want our kids to eat like well balanced, the truth is that, as you have to, at some point you have to learn to make those choices yourself anyway.
Hmm.
Right. And that we should all choose what goes in our bodies.
Yep.
So that's a great way to think about it, is to give your kids, more control over what they eat.
Yeah. So when we say you don't have to eat it if you don't want to, what we're actually teaching them, and what they're learning, is that I decide what goes in my body.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
So I think that's important. I know it's hard, like we have a kiddo that has an eating disorder, and it's really hard for me to look at him sometimes and say, you're just eating Doritos, and he's like, because nothing else is okay. I don't want anything else in my mouth, and I have to just say, okay, like I don't, yeah, of course I worry about his health sometimes, but at the end of the day, he's thriving. If I get a multivitamin into him, at least I'm not pushing him constantly in an area that is making him uncomfortable physically. Right. And that's an important thing.
We'll talk about that a little bit more, on things that we can do to be able to help have that healthy conversation,
Right.
as well. But other examples of ways that we can help kids learn to trust their body. So you brought up, Gail, one that I was going to bring up is no forced hugs. My friends and family's kids should not be obligated to hug me. They should be polite and nice, but they can say no thanks. So how do we do that as adults? We simply say, would you like to give me a hug? And
Right.
therefore, we're then helping them to choose what happens to their body. And
Right.
for me, this is a really important one. And I had to learn this lesson. It was really hard for me when Riley was young because Gavin would come over and Riley was a hugger. Like she only sees him every other weekend when we were growing up. And I was like, oh, she wants a hug. He didn't really like hugs. I had to learn that. And I was like, oh, whenever I equated it to, potentially like molestation, for example, and things like that, when you're teaching your kids that they have the right to hugs, you're also teaching them they have the right that when they feel uncomfortable about that other shit, that they, go, whoa, hang on. So for me, that was an aha moment. I was like, oh my God, because I didn't learn that whenever I was young. The first one you talked about, I had to eat some shit. And I was like, give me a spanking because I'm not going to eat it. And then the other one is I was molested. So I didn't learn the things that I should have autonomy over my own body. So I
Right.
had to learn that myself as I was becoming an adult, and then not reinforce, not push that, or because I didn't learn it, I was then passing it down. So I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, okay, I can't do that. And then with my daughter later on, she was like, oh, I just don't really feel huggy, and then I had to have this conversation with grandma. Like, no, here's why this is important.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah, 100%. I didn't, what I like to tell people to think about, and this has helped with like older people that aren't getting it, is I just say, just because they're younger doesn't mean that it's not weird. Like I would never just, hug you without asking if I could, right? Especially if we just met, or if you didn't remember me, right? Like if we had met, but it had been a year and I didn't remember you because my brain's not done developing, but still, even if I was an adult and I didn't remember you, I wouldn't just like, it wouldn't be okay for you to just come in with a hug. Like you would ask as an adult, can I hug you?
Yeah.
Are you a hugger or something, like something like we would do that to adults. And it's just because someone is younger, it's in our heads that that's okay. We can just do that. But that teaches the wrong lesson 100% of the time.
Yeah. Are you a hugger? That type of thing. I sometimes feel like people still feel like they can't say no.
Right.
And so it is interesting. Like I try to be a little bit more mindful of that. Like, do you like hugs? Like even asking them, like, you can say no. I have even said that, like people that I'm like, oh, I don't know that, I'm getting the sense that maybe they're not a hugger. And I'm like, you can say no, like letting them know that.
Yeah.
Some of the other things with kids that I think that we can say, I'm constantly telling my daughter to trust her instincts, like
Right.
trust what her body is telling her, or trust when she's uncomfortable with people. But simple things like, if you decide, you don't want to go on that ride or don't want to go down that slide or whatever it might be, that's okay. It's letting them know that I trust what my body is telling me. Like if they're scared, then we need to respect that. That doesn't mean we don't have a conversation about fear and all of those types of things, but we should respect it in the moment and respect how it is that they're feeling and whether they want to do something or whether they don't want to do something.
Yep. 100%. So, and that's helpful for safety reasons too, right? So like, we try as parents to avoid too much cautioning, but more like, how are you feeling? Are you feeling safe right now? Like, like when your kid is standing on a log, that's over a stream, or you're like, holy shit, I cannot believe they're doing this. I do not want to do that. But instead of like projecting all this fear onto them because they're in the middle of doing it, we switched it to like, are you feeling safe? How's this feeling?
Exactly. Those are key words related to consent. Like, are you feeling okay? Do you still want to do this? It's those types of words that we can say to make sure people are good. We got a lot of great comments coming in. I'm gonna come up to the top. So sorry I can't stay the whole time. She said gotta run. So have a great weekend. Maria said, I have never understood folks violating consent until my daughter started to express not wanting hugs from me. Ooh.
Right.
And isn't that super hard, Maria? Like, I went through it for a short period of time and I was like, I had to tell my daughter, I was like, just so you know, this is going to be super hard for me. But what I want you to understand is you have the right to decide who hugs you and who doesn't, and when you want to hug someone. So I'm going to respect that. And I'm going to ask you, can I get a hug? And it ended up like, now she's all huggy with me. Like she's constantly hugging me. But because I think I gave her that respect of having that autonomy over her body, she then ended up working out however it is she felt with things.
Right. Gail, this is like so real because, and Sarah kind of touched upon it a little bit too. Like it's hard when somebody comes at you and says, are you a hugger? There's this like implication underneath. It's like, are you a fun, kind person who likes to hug strangers? And then you're like, you're supposed, like, if you don't, you're not, right?
Oh, you're one of those people.
Oh, you're one, right? Exactly. Like, the truth is, a lot of people, because I am very like boisterous, assume that I'm like a hugger, and so a lot of people feel like, oh, Kate's a hugger or whatever. I'm like, I'm really not. I really don't, like I like to hug people I know really well, but I don't like to hug people that are just like acquaintances or, strangers. It's just not, I don't like to yet. It's very, invasive.
And I don't know if people have ever seen this, but it was, I think it was a kindergarten teacher, and it's a video that is on the internet. And the teacher has like different options for kids to be able to greet her whenever they're coming in. Yeah. Oh, did she do that? Yes. Oh, perfect. She said, as a teacher, when my students came to class, I would greet them at the door. I had a sign with a picture of 2 people hugging, 2 people fist pumping, and 2 people high-fiving. And they got to choose. Oh, I love that. How they positively and calmly entered the room. I also saw it where they can dance. Like they don't even have to touch you. Like, all they do is like dance with each other.
And she said her high fives didn't have the touch it, like they didn't have touching, so they didn't have to touch, like if they didn't want any touching. It's so cute.
That's awesome. And welcome, Bruce. And we hope you joined the conversation. So can
we circle back? The thing that one of the things that Gail said, I have a hard time setting that boundary in the workplace. That's, it's been so long since I've worked in an office, but like I don't remember that scenario. Like in offices I worked in, there wasn't hugging unless I was really close with someone and like I saw them outside of work all the time.
Yep.
But like I can't imagine that. But did that happen? So Gail is saying,
yep.
I don't want to hug you if it hasn't. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, as we are doing that, we need to be more deliberate in asking, in saying, I'm a hugger. It's okay if you're not. I saw this video of this person that it wasn't related to the workplace. It was, they were out and about, and it was a guy that was hitting on her, but she said it was the best way she's ever been hit upon. The guy came to her and said, you're really attractive. I would love to be able to chat with you. I also want you to know that it's okay to say no. That, if that's not something you're interested with, it's okay to say no. And she was just like, holy shit. Like this person is like letting me know that I can say no and they won't get offended. They won't get mad. So when you think about even just little things like that, things that someone wants to ask you out and then they get all pissy because you say, no, thank you, or those types of things. Wow. That person is automatically telling you that they don't accept boundaries.
Right. That they're not right. Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Yeah.
It's probably super effective too, because it shows like that you understand that this is not a one-way situation.
Hmm.
That it like all things, it is more effective when there is consent. It's one of the few, it's one of the things that I actually teach salespeople, especially inside salespeople. And
Mm.
it's, you would not, I mean, it's unfortunately, it's all too common that inside salespeople are taught to just start talking,
Yep.
because you only have 30 seconds. So get it out, they pick up that phone, you start talking. And, I've always taken a very different approach, which is there's no reason to talk at all unless you have their consent. Like, you need to say, is this a good time? Can we talk about this right now? You need that consent in order to have any type of, like engagement.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly with that. When people call me from a sales perspective and they don't actually listen to the words that I'm saying, then for me, I'm like, you're really not caring about me. And
Right.
ultimately, that's what consent is about, is respecting and listening. And so when we think about the things that we should do related to signs that someone may not be fully giving, enthusiastic consent, is one, we ask, is this okay?
Right.
Two, we really listen to them. And if they're saying, I don't know, or let's slow down, or, any of those things we were talking about earlier, if it's anything but, yes, let's have a conversation, or listening for right now is not a good time, but I'm willing to have the conversation at this time,
Right.
whatever it is, but we're really listening uh, and respecting what it is that they're asking for. Third, we're making space for no. So, like in the example that I gave you, the guy that said, I would love to be able to take you out on a date. I'd like to chat with you. Just so you know, you can say no. We should be doing that in everything. So, think about
Right.
even in a work situation and things like that. So, when we're using anger or pressure or bargaining, to get to that yes, like even in cold calling or
Mhm.
all of those types of things, we are basically telling people that they don't have the right to say no.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
and then fourthly, yes can change at any time.
Mhm.
So that was a part of the fries things, that it's reversible. And
Right.
so as you were giving an example of, is this still okay? Are you still comfortable with this? It's those types of questions to be able to confirm that everything's still okay, that you still want to do that. And I think
Right.
we need to keep those things in mind even whenever we're dealing with work. Like when we're asking people to take on extra work, or when we're asking them to do something, is that something they actually want to do? That's
Right.
something here. It's probably been a couple years ago, but when Tasha came on board, I had an employee that she was like, well, when did you actually ask her, whether she wanted to take it on? I was like, oh shit, no, I didn't. And so it helped me to sort of reflect upon the fact that, is this something that you would enjoy doing? Is this something, you would do? And one of the things I also talk about is letting people know you can say no.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
100%. I think all of that is super important. And it's interesting. When we think about different industries or different situations, but it's all the same. You have to be voluntarily involved. you know,
Yes.
it has to be completely, 100%. And changing your mind, especially kids, like as they're starting to explore their sexuality, or I know, some even young adults and adults have problems with this, but you can change your mind in the middle of a sex act, especially one you haven't done before, or any, like anything. You can change your mind for any reason, but for teenagers, I think it's an important message to get across. You don't know sometimes what you're consenting to.
Yeah.
you're consenting to something that you like the idea of, and you think you know, and you're informed about it.
Yeah.
But once you are in the middle of it, it's very possible that you're like, oh, well, I didn't know what I didn't know. So, I'm not into this anymore. And that's perfectly okay.
Yeah. So Maria said, I don't want it, whatever that, whatever it is, and unless it's freely given. I also
Yes.
want to call out that we have Sherry joining us. So welcome, Sherry. I think this is the first time you have joined us. So thanks so much. She also added, very true. When you engage employees in projects with their consent, they tend to perform better and beyond because they were a part of a decision-making process. Exactly.
Yeah.
And Bruce has two things. So 1 out of 2. When I was a student and later as a professor, I witnessed a tremendous amount of inappropriate behavior where men took tremendous advantage of what it was was the time a very small minority of female students and faculty. As a result, I chose that I would never show any intent for physical contact, but would allow my female colleagues to determine by their actions their intent, with the exception of zero contact with students.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Bruce.
Yeah, that's an example of a, like, higher ed is often where kind of boundaries and consent often has issues, right? Because it's a place where kids are coming of age. It's also a place where kids are transitioning into adulthood, but they aren't all the way there, maybe emotionally or whatever. Plus, professors, the whole like system of tenure, telling someone they're never going to lose their job really much gives them a lot of power.
It really does.
Yeah. So, you're pointing out something, Bruce, that I'm all too familiar with.
Yeah. So I want to go over some things that are things that we can do to teach our kids consent, and a little bit further. So when we use direct and clear language, so yes means yes, no means no, always listening to what someone is saying and respect their answer. Consent is about both people agreeing and feeling good about what is happening. So we're being direct and clear on what it is acceptable, what isn't. It's also letting kids know that they should trust how they're feeling, trust their instincts, things like that, that will help them to get clear on the fact that they have the right basically to say no.
Yeah. And we had kids in our home that had experienced or were experiencing sexual violence, and sexual misconduct in some way, right? And one of the most important things a therapist taught us was to start really young with our younger kids and educate them so that they have a really good understanding of what areas are okay, for people to touch and what areas aren't. And then also, that it doesn't matter who the person is, right? It doesn't matter who it is. That so you don't have to give consent to people because you're related to them. You don't have to give consent to people because they're younger than you or older than you. Or
in authority.
Right. Exactly. And what Jen and I realized after, many years of working through a lot of these issues is that when you do it right, everyone is talking about it so honestly and openly that, a child may come to you with like a very, very silly thing, like so-and-so ran by and they brushed my right butt cheek, and it was like, oh, okay. Like I think with their knee. I'm like, okay. Are you okay? I'm okay, but I just wanted you to know. I'm like, all right, I noted, but this is the kind of, sorry, I tell this example because this is the kind of thing where too much information is okay. Like it's okay to be a little overboard with kiddos and have them almost be hyper aware of it because it's such an important topic, so if they come to you with things that might seem a little silly, you still want to give them the response of, how did you feel about it? Are you okay? Even if it's like something as ridiculous as they're looking out my window or something really silly that kids come up and complain about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also about just as they are taking actions as well, teaching them to ask permission. So
Yeah.
before they hug someone, before they touch someone, all of those types of things, it's teaching them to ask permission. Like even like borrowing things, like teaching them that if you want to borrow your sister or your brother's things, you can't just go do it. Like that is also consent. So it's not always the physical aspects, it's also my property and my space and my all of those types of things. It can go beyond, like even taking a photo of someone. It's those types of things. Yeah. And Maria said, even petting a dog, that's one of the things I taught my daughter. I was like, that dog may not want you to pet it. And the owner may not want you to pet it. So you can go up and ask them, just respect what it is that they're saying. It's things, examples like that for me, I have a little bit of a different approach in teaching, just because I don't feel like I need to get as graphic with things. I feel like I can teach it in other ways. And I think that's sometimes concerns for people. They're like, okay, but how do I have this conversation with kids when I don't want to get that graphic into things? You don't. There are all kinds of examples day in, day out that you can have those types of things. It's also modeling it. So like if we're not doing it ourselves and they're seeing that we're doing things that we're uncomfortable with, we're modeling that to them. So us saying no, and then also saying it to them, like I've told you no. No means no. Those types of things. It shouldn't matter why I said no. I'm saying no.
It's not a negotiation, right?
Yes, exactly. Oh, funny that you brought that up. I did a podcast with someone else. It was on saying no. And the first version of us doing it ended up not working out because he was having technical issues. But when we were talking, one of the things he said to me is what he had learned is no is the beginning step of the negotiation. And I've heard other people say that. And I told him while I was on that, it never aired because we were having technical issues. I said, as a female, that makes me cringe. And I said, the reason why is that we have spent so much time trying to get people to understand that no does mean no. It doesn't mean continue to ask.
Right.
I get in the negotiation process, you're going to have a conversation back and forth to understand each other. But the moment that someone says no, it's simply maybe just understanding why it is that they're saying no, why it is they're uncomfortable. I get that. And then if you find further ability to be able to come together on things. But when someone tells me that no is the beginning of the negotiation, I just cringe as a female.
Yeah. Same. I have two things, and Nate is bringing up something that I wanted to bring up as well. So, so early on, we gave our kids authority to lie if they wanted to get out of a sleepover or a get together. If they texted or called us and said, but I don't want to come home, then we knew it was their time to leave. So this is something that I love, Nate, that you're doing with your kids. I've done it before with kiddos as well. And even in really kind of smaller social situations, where I've had kids that, because kids are shy. So a lot of times kids, if they're being asked by someone they either don't remember or they don't, know a question, they may not want to answer it. They may not even want to talk, so I have, you can have like special signs with kids. So that's what I'm getting at. You can have them, kind of almost like a safe word, but it's a word or it's a sign where like I need help or I'm not comfortable in this situation and I don't know how to say it, or what you're saying is, we can have this code phrase and I know what that means, so to make you feel the most comfortable.
Yeah. I also think that it's important to teach them to say, I just don't feel good. I want to go home.
Yeah.
And they should be able to just say that. Like,
Yep.
but I understand, like, if you're in a situation like you don't feel like this person is safe to say that to, then you have to have that ability to be able to have the conversation with your parent to get them to understand you don't feel comfortable if that person is there, as you're saying that. So
Yep.
that is also very important.
Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to say, like in the terms of the negotiation, right? And what you were talking about in the sales, I mean, it is just so cringe to think that any conversation should continue after no. It is just such a shame, that that in the business world, we enable that type of behavior all the time. Well, right now, the prospect is saying no, but I'm going to keep working at it. Or like, well, the client, or the employees said no, but we're going to counter offer. It's like, I get it to some degree, right? But I also wish it were different. And I try hard when I'm training other salespeople, as well as when I am selling, to respect the no. And so instead I get around it by saying, okay, I hear your no. Are you open to discussing it based on these things? And if you are, I would love to, but if not, I hear you. And that is, I think, a great way. And that's what I try to teach new salespeople to do, because
I love that.
Yeah, it's so much. It's just like the guy that hit on the woman. It's honoring what you said.
Yeah.
Knowing that, like, in a lot of cases, it does continue on from here, but I still want your consent to continue on from here. And I want to just recognize what you said, because otherwise, and it's far more effective, because then you have their permission, because unlike what your friend who was doing the podcast, sometimes no really is no in a negotiation, right?
Yeah.
And then you wasted all of your time negotiating with someone who was not negotiating voluntarily with you.
I have had salespeople or inside salespeople call me, and I will tell them things like, that is not a problem for me. And then they just continue. And I'm like, are you not hearing anything I'm saying? Like, why would I now do business with you when you're not even respecting what it is that I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Why would I give you money?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like, I just don't want to give money. Like, why would I give money to somebody who's disrespecting me?
Yeah, exactly. So I want to give an example of how we could potentially explain to kids what boundaries look like. So I came up with something as an idea. It's also a little fun because we're using bubbles, invisible bubbles. So imagine a boundary is like an invisible bubble around you that shows others how close they can come to you and what kind of behavior is okay. Just like how we respect others' bubbles, we also need to respect our own. And it's okay to say no if someone is making you feel uncomfortable or if you need space. And boundaries help us feel safe, respected, and in control of our own bodies and feelings. I think the feelings aspect is the other part of this as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's trusting how you feel, not just about, trusting the physical aspect of things.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's critical. And I think, giving the kids a visual of the bubble can totally help. Like I loved Carrie's visual of the, hula hoop. Anything
Yeah,
that allows you to keep space,
I love that.
and like I've said a couple of times, you start this really young, when
Mhm.
kids are interacting with other kids, you can start this at a young age. There's all sorts of body language that you can teach babies to pay attention to too. Like when a toddler is reaching for a hug and the other toddler is like, backing away.
Yes.
You can stop the toddler and say, oh, look, so-and-so doesn't want the hug. It's not appropriate to say to the 18-month-old who can't ask, you should have asked first for that hug, buddy. They
Yeah.
don't get that, but you can teach them that, like, oh, backing away, or like how you teach a kid that if a dog growls, it's probably not safe. You can teach them the body language that other people are exhibiting.
Exactly. So when people are moving out of the way or they're pushing you with their hands, so those nonverbal signs, that's another thing, those cues of saying, "Oh, it looks like so and so is not comfortable with that." So
Yeah,
we're acknowledging that that person is uncomfortable. We're also letting the child know they're uncomfortable. Like, okay, if you see these types of signs, these type of nonverbal cues, that should be your indication that you should back off,
yeah,
whatever that may be. The other reason I think this is super important is also related to building people's self esteem. Um, when we have autonomy over our own feelings and our own body, and we really frame consent around respect, we then are really allowing people to, we're promoting positive attitudes. And I also say sex positive attitudes because we are allowing them to learn what is and isn't acceptable as they do start to become more sexually active and things like that.
right,
So for me, some of the things that I also find that sometimes people will do is shaming related to sex. And the reason I think that that is super important and relates to consent is you are teaching, when we say things that are shaming of other people, we're teaching them that if they are that, you should have guilt, you should have shame. I'm judging those people. And when we do that, we are negatively impacting people regarding their self-esteem, their overall well-being, and we're just harming individuals, and potentially also negatively impacting them related to relationships down the road as well. I'm going to give some examples. So think about the people in your life as you were growing up and some of the things that they may have said. So, when you think about things that are said about females, for example, such as, oh, she's a slut, she's sleeping around with different people. And then on
mhm,
the male side, we will say things like real men shouldn't show emotions or vulnerability. So when either of those things are true, or people might exhibit those things, we're judging them. We're also telling them that they should feel shame for those types of things. You can
right,
personally not agree with those things for yourself, but the moment we start judging other people for their
right,
actions, we also don't understand the situations and the things that have led up to it. Because this is something that experienced, seeing in other people. As I started to talk to people because of my experience, what I actually found is a lot of times girls that would actually sleep around, especially early on, it's because they were molested or it's things that they actually went through. That's what they were taught, was that's how you gain love, that's how you gain, attention or things like that. So now we're just continuing to pull them down in self-esteem. They're already dealing with all this other negative stuff.
right,
Now we're just adding on top of that.
right. And if I could just speak quickly on that subject, because there's a role that we can play as a community around young, men and women who might be exhibiting that type of behavior, right? Like and it can start young as well. So like if you see a kiddo that is, you know, seeming to have interest in sex like early, or you see like we had a situation where a little kiddo was often putting her hand like on a thigh, on a male's thigh, but really close, you know, to the private area, you know, and people just kind of might disregard that or just kind of like brush it off. But those are, if you see things like that, and if your gut is just telling you something's off, say something, you know, say something to a trusted adult about it. If you're a kid and you notice that, or, you know, or if you're another, you know, if you see somebody else's kid doing something, you know, maybe just say something, because there could be most likely something underneath there, you know, and we kind of all need to be empowered to do that. It needs to be okay to say that and not be so worried about it, you know, not brush it under the rug or anything like that, you know, but those little things can mean a big difference, or can make a big difference.
Yeah. The other thing that I would say regarding shaming related to sex, and Kate, I know you will relate to this one, is sometimes people will say things like being gay is unnatural and immoral. And for me, one of the things that I think is important to also understand is that if you're saying those things and your child is actually ends up being gay, you're teaching them guilt. You're teaching them shame in how it is that they're feeling, that how they're feeling, they shouldn't trust it. And so the best way that we can handle that is say, you know, I'm going to support you. I'm going to love you, you know, no matter what, you know, and to really be able to have that conversation and say, you know, we all go through having different types of feelings about things. So if this is something that you're feeling, I want you to honor it and to figure out whether that's, you know, something that makes sense or not. And so, and Kate, I think you might have even more a better perspective being someone that had to figure that out themselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that is a hard thing for, I think, young people, is like if they are growing up and they're questioning whether they are part of the LGBTQ community. There's always that flip side of there's a whole group of people out there that think that this is completely wrong. Right. Mm-hmm. So it feels weird to be interested in something that is completely wrong to others. You know, so the biggest thing that, you know, I try to get my kids and others that I'm near to understand is like just what you said, you know, it doesn't have to be for you,
right?
You know, but you have to allow people, just like I can't tell you, Sarah, you are only attracted to red-haired men, you know, like I can't, you know, like I can't tell you what you're going to be attracted to or what you want to do, you know, so I try to use examples like that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of comments that came in. So I want to pull up what Nate brought.
Yeah, I would love to address that one.
He said, how would you define an emotional boundary when kids or adults are playing the I'm not touching you game?
Yeah. So like when you're like, you know, holding
I'm
your
not
finger
touching you. I'm not touching you.
Yes. Yeah. So you still got to get consent. So, you know, and kids don't get that. Here's the thing that I've used when they're situated, because it's similar to like the tickling you component, right?
I was going to say the same thing. Yeah.
Right. So what you have to get the kiddo to understand is that, yes, the element of surprise is fun when you're doing these things. Like the element of surprise when you're tickling someone is fun. I get it. In the case of the I'm not touching you game, what you're really trying to do is like annoy that person, you know, and do so in what you think is a really funny way. So I've tried to have the kiddos explore what they're really after and know that it can still be fun if they get consent first, you know? So like, I'm not touching you is still fun if you both agree to do it to each other, like, so like you say, hey, I want to do I'm not touching you. And then afterwards, you can do it to me, something like that. It is hard, but what we do is we respect kids, so if someone, we've been in situations where sometimes it's clear other parents think we're being a little overboard, but like where a kid will come up to me and say like, hey, JoJo said this, or so-and-so said this word, and I don't like that when they say that word, and I said, okay, have you communicated that to them? Yes, I have set it as a boundary. I don't want them to say that word. So you communicated it to them. Yeah. Did they agree? Yes, they did agree. Okay. Send that kiddo over here so I can talk to him. And then, it's a conversation like, hey, you agreed, I guess you forgot. Okay. I get it. People forget things, but how are we going to try to remember to not forget, to make it as important to us as it is to that person to follow that boundary. Right. Yeah. So that's how I would handle it, Nate, is if one of the kids then said, he's doing the I'm not touching you game to me and I don't like it, and the other kids is like, kind of like, well, what? It's just fun. You got to still take it seriously. Well, it's not fun if you don't like it. Right. So if it was reversed and you didn't like that, it wouldn't be fun for you, so
yeah.
Even
the R in fries, it's reversible. They can also say that they no longer want to do it.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
And so I want to start to wrap things up as we start to think about things that we should make sure that we're asking consent from people. So we've talked about touch. Like most people, that's an obvious one. Although they don't understand like all the components of consent, they still think sexual, but as we've demonstrated, it's also hugs. It's also, like you don't touch people's hair, it's things like that you don't touch a pregnant lady's belly, all of these types of things that sometimes people will do that you don't do that unless you get consent from someone. You don't touch them, period, unless you get consent. One of the other ones is don't take a photo. This is something that, I have been doing. I'm like, are you okay? Can we take a photo? Can we take a selfie? Those types of things.
Can we post it on, getting permission to post it on social media?
Yes. That is something that I have been, trying to do better on. Yep. I shouldn't say trying. I am doing better on it. I am asking people like, hey, is it okay if I post this? You also using something of someone's. So, like the neighbor comes and borrows, something, they're not gonna, just like a neighbor would want to ask permission. Well, even people you're very close with, you should be asking them whether you can use something or borrow something of theirs.
Right.
And then the last one is really, sharing info about someone. So did this person give you permission to share that information with someone else? And sometimes we fuck up. Like oh man, shit, I shouldn't have shared that, type of thing. And that's why on this show, a lot of times I say, I need to, there's some things I want to make sure I'm getting, approval from this person before I share this. So I might share information without the person's name, just to be able to talk about the story. But when we're talking about someone and their name and the things, we need to, is that public information, that they're good with, that being shared beyond you and with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, Nate didn't, he said fries. So you maybe weren't on at the beginning. I'll go ahead and pull it back up. So I love fries, consent, freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. So we're getting the specifics of what it is we agree to. We're both enthusiastic about it. We're both informed of the things that are involved with it. We can come back and say no, and we're also freely giving that as well. So think about that even in the work environment. So a lot of this is related to kids and things like that. But think about the things that you're also asking, the labor you're asking of your employees and things like that. Are you meeting all of that threshold as well? And I'm going to bring up one that Nate brought up with me when I told him I was going to be doing this topic. He said that silence is not consent. And I thought that was super important as well. How many times have we been on a meeting? They're like, anybody have anything to say? All right. Sounds like we're in agreement.
Right.
Well, maybe not. So it's giving people an opportunity. Hey, right now, we want to hear from you. So please reach out to us. Let us know if anybody disagrees with this or has any concerns. And sometimes it's, if you have the ability to if you have enough time, it's going around and understanding from each person. What are your thoughts on this? Do you have any concerns here?
Right.
And
right. And it's making sure that you have, an environment where people aren't afraid to speak, or give them an out. You can always say, we don't have to make this decision immediately. We can also, think about this and, come back to it, giving people the opportunity to email their thoughts instead of, because some people take time to make decisions.
Yeah, I agreed. That's one of the things that Joel will always say to me is he's like, can I have some time to think about this? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Because sometimes people are able to go off the cuff. That's the type of person, I'm able to like think and I'm like, oh, this is what I'm thinking.
Right.
Other people, they need some time to digest things. Like, do I feel comfortable with this? And, is this something that I want to share information about? So it's allowing people some time too.
Yep.
I'm going to pull up Bruce. He said, I allow the rule of future consent, but it comes with a sign. So can I always do the touching game? And if yes, it can be allowed, but includes a sign like a wink initiating it is happening now, allowing for not today. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he also said it's also time such as stopping a person to speak with them.
Yeah.
So thank you, Carrie, for joining us. She said another great episode. Appreciate the insights from you and the audience. And then Nate says, I try to always add a why at the end of SMART, tasking, goals, and updates.
So why isn't to ask the question why.
Oh, why? I got you.
I think that's what Nate's saying, but
yeah. So that's interesting. And so, well, I hope that today gave you guys some further insights into consent beyond just sex, and how it is that you can also help model consent with your kids, how we can model it internally from a work perspective, and how we can continue to build a culture of consent acceptance and allowing people their own autonomy over their thoughts, their feelings, their body, all of those things. So I could talk about this topic forever.
Yeah, I always have such like a million silly examples in my head around consent that I love to like that I use with my kids. And I feel like we could do a whole nother episode, but
I know exactly.
We do them weekly. So we have, 50 a year. So we could do another one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Kate, want to finish us today and leave us maybe with some final thoughts?
Yeah. So thank you guys for joining us, and thanks for all the interaction and insights and commiseration at times, around things that we all don't like. But consent is the most one of the most important kind of tenets of any relationship, whether it is, a stranger on the street or, the person you're most intimate with. We all need to do what we want and when we want, and to do so voluntarily. So kind of, especially as going into this, after the holiday weekend of maybe some additional partying and stuff, make sure that you are listening to yourselves, and your people around you, and have good clean fun.
Yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of the 4th of July weekend,
Yeah.
and enjoy. If hopefully you're off today, and so if you're not, then looking forward to the weekend, and we will talk to you next week. We actually have Jennifer Day who is joining us, and I'm going to get that posted very quickly. So be sure to take a look at that. She's going to be a very fascinating individual to talk with. So don't miss that. And then the following week, we have Daniel Lamb, who is joining us for quite a story about his life and how it is that he has continued to evolve. So be sure to come back next week. We're here every Friday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, and can't wait to reconnect with everyone.
Yep. Go be your badass selves.